This is Let's Talk with Hart Hagen, and today I'm joined by my compatriot Rolf Freese. Rolf, how are you doing today?
Doing great, man. Good to be here.
Good to have you. So, the first half, we're going to hear a lot from Rolf about what he sees going on downtown in the protests. And then the second half, we're going to talk about what Louisvillians really want or what Louisvillians should want. So, the idea there is that, we're supposed to have a government by and for the people. But if the government is not by and for the people, we've got a problem. And for so long, we've been told we have government by and for the people, but it's not. So we're really out of practice when it comes to articulating what we want. So it's like if Greg Fisher or John Yarmouth or somebody were to say, "Hey, I'm not going to take money from big donors anymore. I'm just going to listen to the people. What do you want?" Most of us will go, because we just, we've never really, when's the last time somebody powerful came to you and said, what do you want here? Anyway, we'll get to that in the second half, but Rolf, what's been going on? Tell us what you've been covering downtown with the protests and such.
Yeah, so this past week has probably been the busiest week so far, the protest coverage for me. I've been in just about everything this week, and there's been so much going on that I've had a hard time keeping up with it. Um, but yeah, the protests go on. They're not stopping. There's no end in sight. They're going to be out there. They're dedicated. They want those officers fired that killed Breonna Taylor, and they're not going to get out of the streets till that happens. Fisher's probably not going to get reelected unless he does something different because people are angry. The city is politically charged, and it's not just downtown. It's all over the city right now. Case in point, one of the shows, one of the live streams I did this week, I was out in Lake Forest, out in the East End. I went there directly from work. Didn't even have my equipment, just didn't even have the time, just was straight there and was on my cell phone. Louisville Surge was involved in this, showing up for racial justice. And basically what had happened was there's a family that lives there. The Pineda family it's a Latin family, a Latino family, and they have been harassed. And this has been in the news, but they were harassed by a neighbor in their same little cul-de-sac that they live in, I believe 2 houses over. And threatened the children, Nazi symbolism, the whole nine. It was very scary, and the family was scared. And so they put out a public post, and Louisville Surge, who's been very active at Injustice Square and other protests around the city, stood up through a vigil. It was more of a march. They called it a vigil. It ended up being more of a march and a rally where we met on one side of Lake Forest, marched through the neighborhood, and ended up in front of the Pineda family in their courtyard. Multiple speakers. There were many people from the community that joined in, and it was really beautiful. And they said, we have your backs. And the Pineda family was just so touched. One of their daughters, it apparently was her birthday. She was really young. I don't know how old, 10-ish, somewhere in that neighborhood, maybe younger, probably younger. And it was just beautiful. And then there were chants in front of the neighbor's house who had been harassing them. And this is tied into the Black Lives Matter protest because, again, it's a minority family being targeted by a white lady who's racist. They, the family had worked their life to afford that home, to move into that nice, beautiful neighborhood, only to get treated like that. And they're the only ones in the neighborhood being treated like that. It has an HOA there, and they were not backing the family. And so, that's when the community decided to stand up. If the HOA, I don't know what they're twiddling their thumbs or whatever, giving platitudes and whatnot, but they're not taking any action at all. And so that's where people had to stand up. And I think, I doubt that this neighbor will continue to harass. I believe she's been arrested or at least had charges filed against her since then. But if she does, the community will be back and they're there in support. And so that ties right in with the movement because there's a lot of the same people that are down at Injustice Square, that are down at the marches, that were also at this event. So it just transplanted to that. We also, the day before that was the big news event that happened this week, and that was at Daniel Cameron's house. which you may have heard about, 87 protesters being locked up, initially charged with felonies. That was another thing that started while I was at work. I got off work, got a text message. I was able to get my equipment for that one, stopped home, got my equipment, head straight out there, and I caught the last 30 minutes of it. So I didn't get to see the initial setup. But by the time I had got there, I had to park really far away from all the police that were there, in a residential neighborhood. I was not expecting that kind of walk. I finally got there. The whole area is blocked off, dozens and dozens of police. And there's probably at this point, about 15 protesters left on the lawn. All these protesters were given the option to be able to leave freely, but they chose to stay and get arrested because that's why they were there. And this was to put, Daniel Cameron's our AG, our Attorney General, and this is, to put pressure on him to get something done. He's another guy twiddling his thumbs, sitting on his hands, whatever he's doing, obviously they say the investigation's in process, but it's not happening, and they need to get with the program. So the people came.
So Daniel Cameron chose to make an issue out of the masks, but he hasn't made an issue out of gunning down an innocent person.
Right.
But go ahead, I interrupted.
No worries. He's a guy that's totally fine with armed protesters at our state capitol, up in people's faces with no masks, hanging, doing a mock lynching of the governor on a tree there. No worries, nobody arrested, no big deal. People come to his home where he's not even at, he wasn't even there, and sit on his lawn, literally just sit on the lawn, and they want to attempt to charge them with felonies. Thankfully, that was dropped, and when we kind of hoped, we had hoped that had happened. Everybody that went there was expecting to be arrested. They went there knowing that, but they were expecting to be arrested for something like, trespassing, something like that, not a felony that carried with it, I believe, 1 to 5 years with it. So it's crazy. So you can see the contrast, when it comes to justice for minorities. There's nothing, they want to be treated as terrorists, but, people that are armed with no mask can show up on the lawn, make a doll of the governor and lynch it. And that's not a problem. So it's that kind of thing is why people are out in the streets. That's why people are at Injustice Park. That's why people are having protests around the city, is exactly because of stuff like this. And so that's why it's not going to stop. The people are motivated, and the city's as politically charged as I've seen it in my lifetime, probably since 68, maybe early 70s, possibly. But either way, I wasn't alive for any of that. I haven't seen anything like this in the city, and I'm very proud of the city, the way that they stand up for that. Did you get to keep up with the Daniel Cameron situation with the protest? Did you look at that at all?
I really haven't. I know very little about it.
Okay. But yeah, that was it. The whole event, I would guess, was about 2 hours or so. I got there for the last 30 minutes, and I just wanted to make sure my camera was on these protesters to make sure that they were treated fairly, and there were, no violence from the police or anything like that, which honestly, I can say I didn't expect that, because we were in the East End, a very nice neighborhood, and you just don't see those kinds of things out there. The police aren't there knocking heads the way they are downtown, or in the West End. It's not a good look out there with the property values. So it's amazing to see the difference in the treatment again, based on neighborhood and the value of the homes and the financial value of the homes in these neighborhoods is night and day. But yeah, so but yeah, the city didn't stop all week. So yesterday we had a kids march, the first kids march, and I went and I live streamed that. It was a short march, just a couple blocks, but that started at the Louisville Science Center over on Main, and went up 8th to Market to 6th to the square, and several dozen people were there, kids and their parents, and it was amazing. They even had kids on the megaphone leading chants. That was really cool. That girl, you know, she's probably 6-ish. It was leading the chants on the megaphone. Very cool. A lot of cool signs. You know, completely different crowd. You still had, you know, all of us indie media flying around everywhere with our cameras, and a few of the regular protesters, but you know, mostly different parents I'd never seen, and children, and it was nice. And apparently this is going to be the first of such, from what I hear. So look for more of those. So if you want to get out and get involved as a family, you know, I don't see anything better than that. It's a short march. You don't have to be out there for hours. It's just a few minutes. You're with other families, other children. You know, there are medics there, street medics, in case anything happens. The streets are being blocked off with people in cars and stuff. So you know, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. Yeah, definitely look for those. You know, that's another way to get involved. And then kind of, you know, what was it, Friday night? So I got back out after the kids march, went and got something to eat, came back to the square, and didn't know what was going to go on that night. They kept it pretty secret, but what happened is we marched to 4th Street Live. So that's been reopened, and nobody was streaming. We marched up quietly, quickly. I got there, got in formation, literally a formation of lines. They had everybody lined up. And once that happened, you know, there was probably half a dozen of us live streamers there. We all went live. Bam, hit 4th Street, just stormed right up in there. And right in the middle, if anybody's been to 4th Street, that seating area right in the middle, there's a small stage. Just took it over, chanting, folks there eating, not knowing what to do, looking really confused. Definitely, you could tell by the looks on their face, these aren't people involved in the protest at all. I've been on these marches and protests, and you see the support. You know, people honk. You walk by somebody's house, and they chant with you. They raise their fists up, stuff like that. None of that was going on at 4th Street Live. So that was a good crowd to target, because they were uncomfortable. That, you know, when I say uncomfortable, they were safe. You know, nobody was there to do harm, to do any violence, to do vandalism. They just came in to take it over, let people know that, you know, we're not stopping. You know, we're in the streets. We're coming to 4th Street Live. You want to, you know, we have no justice in the streets, but people are out spending money at the bars and stuff. You know, we want to show them, you know, what is important in the community. Come out and join us. You know, help us get this. Then we can all go out and hit the bars afterwards. But let's get justice for Brianna, justice for David, justice for Tyler. That's what has to happen. So they went in. It was efficient. It was quick. They marched out the other side. Everybody spoke on the megaphone. Came right back through. Saw these looks on these people's faces again. It was priceless. And marched back to the square. Kind of the one negative that I see afterward, and you're seeing some of this, and I think it's because there is a little bit of infighting in the movement right now that I think needs to be ironed out. One of the beautiful things about this movement is there's no specific leader. There's no one person. Now, on the live streams and then in Justice Square, you know who the people are that are leading, who are organizing. We all know who they are, but they're not all necessarily from the same group. So there's a little bit of difference of philosophies. So we saw a little bit like that last night, of some arguing of how to do this, and accountability, protest accountability, how to handle yourself out there, how to not shed a negative light on the protests. And we've talked about this before. We had that one round table with Vince where I say, you know, protesters will hold their own accountable. So you get enough people out, there's a chance, you know, percentages say there might be a knucklehead somewhere in the crowd. You get enough people together, but we don't want them there. They don't represent the movement. They don't represent the protests. If there's 100 of us marching, 99 of us in the movement, and one person being a knucklehead, who's the media going to fixate on? It's that knucklehead, and they're going to try to discredit the 99 for the one. Well, we know better. So, you know, accountability has to happen. So I was at the square again today for about 3.5 hours. I went down about noon, and there's still some more of that continued on. So I hope that gets ironed out. We need everybody on the same page. And, you know, I'm not going to take sides with anybody and say this person's right, this person's wrong. It's not even about that. We need you know, everybody's heart is in the right place. Everybody's there for the movement. You know, we've been out there night after night. People are having to go to work, and then they get off work and they come out. People are tired, exhausted. The heat is just ridiculous out there the last couple of weeks, but people are still out there. But you know, that kind of stuff takes a toll on the psyche. So you're going to see some squabbling and stuff, and I hope that gets ironed out soon. And there are a lot of people trying to step in and take care of that, but I don't think that's going to be a detriment on the movement at all. I think we'll be okay. And there's enough leaders, you know, there's enough leaders out there that we're going to be okay. But I can say this, there's a lot I can't say on camera, a lot of information that I cannot spread right now, but I know, you know, people are planning, people are thinking, there's a lot going into this, and people are trying new things. And you know, just look out for some of the stuff's coming. There's a lot of creativity, a lot of stuff, and you know, I think it's going to spark the movement even more. So just stay tuned for that. I'll try to get my camera on as much of that as I can, but you know, I'm not at liberty to say some things. So, but that's where we're at right now. It's a beautiful thing, and so that's what I've seen to date this week. I was thinking about going out tonight, but I have some equipment issues, and it was just too hot. I don't think I'm going to go out tonight. But you know, it's going to continue on. What's your kind of thoughts on the movement right now? What you've kind of seen in the news, or you know, what have you seen?
Well, that's an excellent question. So one thing that comes to mind is, you know, what do people want? And one thing that concerns me sometimes is kind of the when the establishment can just give some kind of token action, like firing one police officer that was involved in a murder of people, a murder of an innocent person. So you fire one police officer, but none of them have been charged, none of them have been convicted, nobody's been arrested, nobody's behind bars. So you've got it's like the establishment can just hold out, and then throw you a bone, and then move on. I will say that, you know, this is the biggest thing in our lifetimes, like he was saying. I'm old enough that I was alive during the 1968 protests in Chicago, but I didn't know what was going on. And you know, this is the biggest thing in our lifetimes. It's like a perfect storm of, you have COVID that causes a recession, and the government takes that opportunity just to throw a bunch of money at billionaires and Wall Street and not take care of people. I mean, there's plenty of work to be done. There's plenty of socially positive work to be done, and for the government to just throw money at Wall Street and hope that some of it trickles down, it just shows how lame and reprehensible our system is. And for the government to keep on, putting military pressure on Venezuela and Iran and Syria, it just shows that there's just cruelty and stupidity at the very top. So I see police brutality and police murder as a symptom of a deeper problem, and that is a lack of democracy. I mean, different people who want change, people like you, people like me who want change, different people are going to have different ideas about what needs to change. Like, what are the top few issues? And if we change that, and some people say, well, get money out of politics. And I agree, that's very, very important. And some people will focus on independent media and a free media and net neutrality, and that's very, very important. To me, I see it as a lack of democracy. I mean, we've been told since we were knee-high to a grasshopper that America is the leader in the world in freedom and democracy, and I come to find out that that's the opposite of the truth. So to me, what we're asking for, or at least what we should be asking for, is we want true democracy. Democracy is where you get to vote on what affects you. And if people say we have democracy because we have two parties and we could vote on both parties, well, the Soviet Union had elections, And but was that democracy? The Democratic People's Republic of Korea, is it democracy just because democratic is in the title? Democratic Republic of Congo, is it democratic just because democracy is in the title? Are we a democracy just because we've been told since we were knee-high to a grasshopper that we're not only a democracy, but we're the world's leader in freedom and democracy? Just because people say it doesn't mean it's true. Democracy is where you get to vote on what affects you, including the police. I mean, the fact that we're having to work so hard for community supervision of police shows that we don't actually have a democracy, because democracy is like the proof is in the pudding. If public policy reflects public opinion, then you have democracy. If public policy is the opposite of public opinion, then you do not have a democracy. So that, to me, that is what we are bargaining for. It's what we should be bargaining for. We want real, actual democracy.
Absolutely. And in this case too, particular with the Breonna Taylor case and the officers, one has been fired, two have not been fired. The thing is, though, with just a firing, they don't really care. They're just off to the next department, and in between they get a free vacation. That's not justice. That's not democracy. So it's more than that. These guys need to be fired, yes. They need to be blacklisted from getting other jobs, yes. But they need to be charged and convicted. We have to send a message to these officers, that not just here but around the country, that this is not okay. This is not what you're hired to do. You're hired to do a specific job, and this is not it. You are part of the justice system. You are not the justice system. We have judges, we have courts, we have attorneys for a reason. And so if you think somebody is being a criminal, or you're charging them with a crime, then you need to let that system play out and run its course the way it's designed. It's not up to you to just say, hey, I get to fire off shots and end this person's life. Maybe they're a criminal, maybe they're not. They're denied their rights. And that's absolutely not it. There's no defense for that. We don't hire police
Why is
to
it
be
that way,
judge, jury,
Ron?
and
Why is it that way? And what is it systemically that needs to change? Why is it that police get to kill people, unarmed people, time after time after time, and nothing happens, no serious change?
there's not one specific reason. It's a multitude of reasons. Uh, you know, one, in no specific order, but one is like the police unions. And I'm a big fan of unions, but the police unions are probably the worst union out there.
Mm-hmm.
They protect them from anything and everything. And with that comes that thin blue line where the officers are protecting each other. So even a good cop who is not out doing anything wrong, who's aware of what his coworkers are doing and not speaking up and not doing anything about it, is just as complicit in my eyes. You know, okay, you didn't actually do it, but you knew about it and you kept your mouth shut, and push comes to shove, you're going to back that officer. That's a problem.
What
So
kind
that
of pressure, what kind of peer pressure is it within the police department that causes that? I mean, what's going on there?
well, as we talked about before, the police, everybody thinks the police are here to protect and serve us, but they're not. That's not what their job duties are. Their job is, one, is to protect the establishment from us, and two is income generation through various means. So that none of that has anything to do with protecting and serving the community. And then you have hiring practices where the pay isn't great, so you're not attracting people for pay right off the top, and then you're weeding out through the hiring and training process anybody who is too intelligent and has too much empathy. So now you have people in uniform with low wages who aren't empathetic, who are not, in many cases, well, they're not, generally not the brightest bulb out there, but also in many cases now, they don't even live in the communities they serve. So they have no ties there. They come from out of county or wherever they come from. And that's one of the things that needs to change too, is, officers need to live where they serve. And if they did that, you know, they would be more in touch with the community, and we'd probably see more of that. And then also, you know, with all that comes the funding. And so when you look at all the major cities across the country, you can see that the police department gets the most funds, the highest percentage of the budget. So even here, in the midst of all the furor in this country against the police, not just Breonna Taylor, but George Floyd and the rest, you know, so many, um, politically charged country right now, what are we doing? What are we doing? Well, I'll tell you what we're doing. We have a $750,000 increase to the police budget. Where's that money come from? Well, we have a $775,000 decrease to the Free Public Library. So this is decades worth of investment in the wrong areas. So if you don't invest in your community year after year, decade after decade, and you invest in the police, well, what happens? Well, over time, all these community projects, you know, to stamp out homelessness, hunger, addiction, uh, you know, so many topics, all these things, you know, libraries for education, our schools, instead of creating a society where we boost things up, give people the tools they need, the education, the resources that they need to be successful, where they're not, you know, nobody has to worry about a life of crime because the tools are there, and you're living a good life. You know, instead we're putting money into the back end of everything, where we're not giving people those tools, those resources, that education, and now people are struggling in life, which ends up, you know, struggles compound on themselves. So, you know, being poor, when you're poor, it compounds on itself, and you get more poor, and it's almost impossible. It's not impossible, but it's almost impossible to get out of that situation. So we're investing in a community that's punishing people for getting in these situations and incarcerating people, but that's not the way to go. What we need to do is educate, lift people up. When that happens, the crime will come down. We don't have the need for these police. And last thing I want to say about it is, we have the police doing too many things. They're doing jobs they don't need to be doing, especially when they're armed. So, you know, if it's a mental wellness check, we don't need 12 guys with guns showing up for that, especially when they have no training. We need somebody with that kind of background to show up, and they more than likely won't even need a weapon or any of that, because they're trained in de-escalation and talking to people. And you know, we need to take that kind of job away from the police. We need to take the income generation away from the police, and we just need to focus on literally protecting and serving the community. So, you know, we pay them more, we don't weed out good people, and that'll get us better people, and then we get them better training combined with less job duties, and that's when the police will, in turn, as I like to say, will work with the community and for the community instead of against the community. So, you know, that's why you know, that's a very long answer, but there's no one simple thing to why that is, but that's what I see. Are there any other factors that you see involved that maybe I would have missed?
Well, one, question that I have is, when a bad thing is going on, when a cop is brutalizing a civilian, and this is outside the bounds of anything remotely resembling due process, what are the factors and the pressures that cause the cops to protect other cops instead of protecting the civilians that are being brutalized? That's just a question that I have, and I
So
don't know
I
the
guess
answer.
it's one of those brotherhood things, you know, kind of like, you know, being in a fraternity or sorority, or just being experiencing a traumatic life event with a group of people. There's always going to be that. And so, you know, even with people's jobs, your coworkers, you kind of go through your work struggles together, and they do that. You know, I can see, you know, how the police become a you know, a group, you know, a group of friends. They go out after their shifts and drink, or as we heard at Daniel Cameron's house, my friend was there, and a lot of the police were walking off, and she walked with them to kind of listen to their conversation, and they were all proud of themselves for for arresting the protesters, and they're talking about going to Starbucks so they can all hang out and drink coffee together in the afternoon. And so they have that brotherhood. And so they always protect themselves. So every once in a blue moon, you will see a good cop stand up and say, hey, what happened in this particular situation, or the way this department is systemically, it's wrong. And what happens to that cop? He ends up losing his job for some reason or another. He gets ostracized. Unlike shooting somebody and getting fired and then going to a different city and getting a job, these people can't get a job in law enforcement ever again. So they just run them right out of there. You know, you got to toe the line if you're an officer, and they put that over. And again, I get the brotherhood, but you're putting that over the good of the community, the good of the people, and not just that, but the community and the people are the taxpayers paying your salary. So that makes it even more disgusting. We've got a lot of changes to make in our policing, and our prison system, and everything. It's
Well,
there's a
here's
lot of
one
work to be
thing.
done.
Here's one thing that comes to mind. I'm going to use this as a segue to my main topic. You and I are sitting here, not getting paid anything at all for this, and we're trying to do the job of the government. There should be more time, money, energy. The citizens should have the time, money, and energy to monitor, to do a lot of things that are in the public good that they don't. And the powers that be that just want to make a profit from the system, the people that are just after power and profit, they want us to be too busy. They want us to be, you know, we've got our day jobs are not in journalism. We have, you know, our day jobs have nothing to do with journalism. And that may change someday, but for now, we're just doing this on a volunteer basis. And the powers that be, they don't want good. They don't want good government. They don't want journalism, which is part of, which is an essential check on the power of government. There's a lot of things that they don't want, and so let's look. I have a handy dandy list of things here on my iPhone on a document, and you know, so let's ask and answer the question: what are we looking for? Let's pretend. Let's just go off on a wild. Let's just leave all sanity aside and say government should work for the good of the people. What are the details? What do we want to ask for? So I'm going to take like maybe 5 minutes and try to just name the 15 or more things that I have here. And then if anything piques your interest, we can talk about that. But okay, so to me, it's like, so the topic here is like what Louisvillians should want. In other words, what should citizens want? What kind of, you know, big picture, forget what we've been taught in school. Forget ideology, forget buzzwords like a free market, forget the fiction that is terrorism. And let's talk about, well, what life do we want? And okay, so what Louisvillians should want include, for one thing, we should want freedom and democracy, which we arguably don't have, and we'll get to that. Freedom is participation in power. Democracy is when you get a chance to vote on that which affects you. There's a ton of stuff that we don't get to vote on because both parties are on the wrong side. So if you've got a choice between Democrats and Republicans, both are bought by the war machine, both are bought by the big banks, both are bought by big food, on and on. So, but true democracy is where we get to vote on what affects us. Another thing we should want is local sovereignty, which is where we get to decide as a democratic process, we get to decide which businesses do and do not do business here. And we get to make those decisions on the basis of who has an ethical and sustainable supply chain and who has ethical and sustainable business operations. If we did that, Home Depot would be gone, Starbucks would be gone, McDonald's would be gone. And we'll get into that. I'm just saying, okay, McDonald's, you've got however many stores you've got, fine. But it stops there until you get your act together and you have an ethical and sustainable supply chain that chain of events that leads up to the hamburger that somebody gets. We want that hamburger to have an ethical and sustainable supply chain, and we get to decide. If you're not paying minimum wage, we get to say, as a democratic process, that you do not have an ethical and sustainable supply chain, and you do not do business here. We also want, what else do Louisvillians want or should want? We want a fair wage, a living wage. We want creativity and control in our work, which means democracy at work, which means we work in cooperatives and more so than traditional hierarchical businesses. We could talk about how to make that transition, but we want control over the work that we do. We want affordable housing, not gentrification. We want a functioning media. Wouldn't take much money at all for this community to have a functioning media, and to hell with this corporate media, which just serves all the worst elements. We want freedom from militarism. On average, every American pays $4,000 at minimum for our military industrial complex. We want freedom from that. And there are legalities involved there. I mean, we got to go up against federal law on that one, but let's decide what we want so we know what we're asking for. Some of the systems that we want changed, we want a transportation system where the average individual does not have to pay, on average, $10,000 per car to get around. I've done the math. Louisvillians pay billions of dollars for a freaking car at $10,000 on average each. We could take a fraction of that money and have a functioning transportation system that does not drain our life and our money from us and send it off to who knows where, out of the local economy. So we want a transportation system that works for us, not Wall Street. We want a food system that works for us, not Wall Street. We want I call it stuff. Like the top three systems we need to change are food system, transportation system, and stuff, meaning consumer goods that, but we need we can get into that, but we don't want goods that are made from slave labor. We can talk about the details. This is not easy. It's not simple. It's not, but start with democracy. So we want to deal with the phenomenon of upward wealth redistribution. We're constantly giving our money to rich people through technology, through corporate, corporations. What they do best is shift their costs onto us. We need to stop the upward distribution of wealth. We need to lower the cost of living. We need a lower cost of living. Damn it, Metro Council, work for us. What have you done for us lately? And so let's talk about cost of living. We want Medicare for all. Metro Council can't do that, but we need Metro Council members who, to a person, want that for us. And they're thumbing their nose at the state and federal government if it doesn't give us what we, the people, want. Metro Council, stop going to bat for absentee investors that just want to suck the life out of our economy. Do something for us. Metro Council, what have you done for us lately? So we want to lower the cost of living through Medicare for all. We want freedom from the cost of cars. We want affordable housing, free public college, freedom from the military industrial complex. All that results in a lower cost of living. If we had a lower cost of living, there's a lot that we could do, but the powers that be don't want us to have a lower cost of living. They want us to be slaving away. They want us to be too busy, too tired, too sick, too distracted to participate in good government. And lastly, what we want is freedom to pursue socially beneficial careers. There are good people in the military, but the military is a bad institution. So we need we need to take the money that's being dedicated to the military, and we need to pay people for socially beneficial careers, including ecological farming, ecological forestry, ecological landscaping. We need for people to be able to pursue low carbon careers in health, education, and the arts. An example of the arts is we need, in the New Deal, they paid people to be actors and visual artists, et cetera. And we need to pay people to do local community theater instead of, in essence, we're paying Hollywood. We're paying a bunch of monopolies to do Hollywood movies. The Hollywood movies have a lot of problems, including you can make a pro-war movie and get all that subsidized by the government. But if you make an anti-war movie, you're on your own. It's a violence against free speech, free press, free assembly, all the things that we hold dear or should hold dear. And we need to be able to pursue socially beneficial careers that relate to alternative energy. So solar is not a cure-all. Wind is not a cure-all for our carbon woes. All the more reason why we need people working in these fields who are not under the delusion that we can just throw solar energy at the problem. Check that off the box. We're done with that. Solar and wind, so-called clean energy, is not that clean. Yet climate change is real. Biological extinction, the sixth great extinction, is real. We need good people on this work instead of paying good people to go blow up people overseas because they happen to be Arab or dark-skinned or Muslim, or all these, all these fictions that we have about who's a threat to us. People overseas are not a threat to us. We have an Atlantic on one side and a Pacific on the other side. There's only one threat to us, and that is incoming missiles from the nuclear powers, and we haven't done squat to stop that. The Defense Department is not about defense. It's about milking us dry and making us slave away for stuff we don't even want.
Yeah, that's a whole lot of good points there. And I don't know if I can comment on all of it. But yeah, as far as, at the city level, things I'd like to see now, obviously, first and foremost with the movement right now, we need to restructure the police department the way they're doing. We need full accountability and full transparency in the department, and officers that live where they serve, and everything else we discussed before. That is a must. To Fisher, you're not getting reelected without fixing that, brother. You're not. So I keep saying that in these videos. Get it together, Greg, because or don't, and we'll give you the boot and try somebody else. But you got to do it. As we talked about before, I really want to see municipal broadband here. I think it's an absolute must to progress the city, not just keep up, but to progress. So we have to do that. We need control of the internet in our own hands here with net neutrality built right into that system, so that it's always going to be there, guaranteed to us. What else do we need? We need, as you say, democracy. One of the things we can do specifically at a city level is what's happened in a few cities around the country, and that's an anti-corruption act. And those take different forms, based on the city. It's not a one-size-fits-all, but basically it stops the way that money comes into our politicians and the way our elections are funded. So if we could come together and work on that and get the Anti-Corruption Act here, that would be hugely beneficial. That would stop some of this madness with the developers, sticking their nose into everything politically around the city. So those are keys. We also need to, we need to cool the heat island effect of the city. So we need to plant trees. We need to plant bushes. We need to look out for pollinators. So we need milkweed and herbs all along the sides of our roads, and the highways. locally to help with that for our food system. We need to end the food deserts in the West End. You know, they need more places to be able to shop and get fresh quality food. That has to happen. Um, and then some other things I'd like to see that, you know, aren't really enacted that would benefit us here, but aren't enacted at the city level and more national level. For one, end these wars, bring our troops home, focus on defense, focus on building up the country, focus on building up our infrastructure. We need to, you know, we have lead in the water of so many cities and other contaminants. So we need to redo the water system in a lot of places. We need to think forward as far as the way of transportation. So nationally, we need high-speed rail. Why do we not have this? You know, Japan's had this. We can do this. You know, we need that rail from the West Coast to the East Coast, from the North to the South. We need that connection, and that would be more affordable for the people as well. So those are some of the things. I'm sure there's so many more than later on I'll think, why didn't I say this and this? But you know, that's what comes off the top of my head, locally and nationally, along with everything that you said there. And yeah, just unrelated comment on one of your points about the Hollywood movies and the war is we have to remember we see these war movies and the way that the heroes and villains are portrayed in these movies. A lot of people don't know this, but CIA is highly involved with Hollywood. They get directly involved in the scripts. You know, movies like American Sniper, just one, but it's really hard to find a mainstream movie. You know, obviously some independent stuff, people do what they want, but a mainstream Hollywood movie, it's really hard to find something where the heroes and villains are painted in a different light. Everything is predictable. You know, you got the fun-loving, great guy that's the police officer or the FBI or CIA agent. You know, it's a guy you want to root for, and you know, he's there with his heart. But that's not how it goes. You know, they're out there trying to start wars, perpetuate wars, continue wars, continue the military-industrial complex. So they do work hand in hand with Hollywood, and that's why you see the movies that we see, and that's why you see the stories in the movies get told the way that they get told. And that's just more of that indoctrination that's subtle. So if you're somebody that watches movies all the time, you're into war movies and this and that, slowly but surely you're being indoctrinated over time to support these offensive wars that we're in and treat them as if it's, you know, something that's defensive. So I just want to point that out. I don't know how we fix that in a quick manner, but yeah, you know, Hollywood, that's why you see what you see from Hollywood. And this has been documented. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is not something I feel like. This has literally been documented, and you can look that up and you can find, there's even lists of movies. So I would check that out if you get the time.
Right. Well, when you see things like unnamed sources from the intelligence community say that Russia is giving the Taliban rewards for knocking off American soldiers, okay, unnamed sources, even if they were named sources, would you trust them? I mean, this is the element. I don't even want to say, you know, you don't have to name an organization or a person. You just have to say who wins when lies float around about who wins when we get into the Iraq war on basis of lies. Who wins when we get into the Vietnam War on the basis of lies? Who wins when everything that's gone on in Latin America in the last 100 years in terms of American foreign policy, most of it is secret, and you know, who wins? The military wins, American corporations win, the shareholders win, but do the people of the U.S. win?
We sure don't win in that scenario. As a matter of fact, the poorest in our communities often lose because those are the ones that the military targets, you know,
So
and
the
then
economic draft.
yeah, and
You
then
you go into the military because you need a career with benefits, and then you have all this propaganda. So people go in out of a sense of duty, and they go in because they need a job and benefits. And who does that who does that target? People that need a job and benefits. I mean, and the military. There's one thing that Jimmy Dore covered. It had to do with it was written up in Forbes or Wall Street Journal, one of those magazines, where it said that the military, the Pentagon admitted that the recession is good for recruiting. Things like that.
That's yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
Okay, so you and I are you and I are advocates for free, independent media, and one of the things that we could do, if we can get some local support through nonprofit funding, through government support to the extent that we trust government to do anything, but it wouldn't take a whole lot of funding, a whole lot of support to get to where we can give corporate media a run for their money, because we can embarrass their sorry asses, because they're always spewing pablum and baby poop. So this scenario comes to mind. So there's this old friend. I actually unfriended her on Facebook. I couldn't believe how closed-minded and judgmental she was being. But I posted something over 4th of July that I expected it to be a little bit provocative. And it was something to the effect, it was this American flag, and I had written on the American flag, it said, let's take time to remember those veterans that become disillusioned by our wars for empire. Let's take time to remember those veterans that become disillusioned by our wars for empire. And she said, "Oh, you're being so disrespectful. My son's a Marine." Okay, and I didn't even engage with her on. I, responded by, but here's a mom that's been militarized. For one thing, here's somebody that thinks that her son is actually defending us. She thinks he's actually protecting us. For another thing, I happen to know the son is a college graduate, and he probably got put through U of L on ROTC scholarship. So it's like, why are my tax dollars and yours going for somebody to engage in the military that does not protect us? They make the world a lot less safe, not to mention and I'm wanting to say to this militarized mom, I'm wanting to say, okay, they're protecting us from what? Okay, 3,000 people died on 9/11, 7,000 veterans of Afghanistan and Iraq have died by suicide since 2010. Several thousand, almost that many, have died in combat. We haven't yet. So that's 15,000 people. And we haven't even gotten yet to the people that come home with permanent wounds, visible wounds, invisible wounds. And we have not yet talked about probably 1 million people that have died, or easily 1 million people have died in Iraq since the first Iraq War. Possibly that many have died since the second Iraq War began. You have kids being terrorized by the clear blue sky, because it's the clear blue sky when drones can operate. If it's cloudy, the drones can't operate. So kids are scared of a clear blue sky because they've been terrorized by drones. Drones on average kill 9 civilians for every 1 supposed enemy combatant. Drones are used to kill American citizens. Obama assassinated American citizens, Anwar al-Awlaki and his son, and a number of people in collateral damage. So I'm wanting to talk to this militarized mom and say, they're protecting us? How the hell does that work? Besides, you're supposed to be a Christian. I thought you were supposed to love your neighbor as yourself. How about the part about do unto others as you would have others do unto you? How about blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God? When did love your neighbor become bomb your neighbor? Would Jesus want you to bomb Iraqis? Mothers, children,
not just that, but, you know, folks are getting out of the military and they're being abandoned by the military as a veteran, and a high percentage of troops that serve also come out with PTSD. So now they're struggling with that for pretty much the rest of their life, dealing with PTSD because they're over being used to fight an offensive war, or in some cases, just to maintain a war that's there to sell military product, or to steal somebody's resources, those kinds of things. And to take it back, to police accountability, a lot of these veterans come out with PTSD and then become police officers. And then they go into neighborhoods and, they get in a stressful situation and that PTSD kicks in. So even if they are good people, once that PTSD kicks in, they may not be in total control of their actions in the moment when dealing with the community. So it all does tie back together in one form or another, and that's just one of those forms. But yeah, so, you know, well, is that military mom going to be there for her son when he comes back with PTSD? Hopefully he doesn't. I hope the best for him. But, is she fine with that? I don't know. So I personally, I'm not around that age group too much in my life at this point, but whenever I am and somebody's thinking about the military, I tend to try to talk them out of that and let them know what it is. It's like, if you want to go, then go. If you don't have any options, then go, but understand what it is that you're actually doing. And, the recruiters will never be honest about that when they're out there, selling the stories that they sell of what, enlisting looks like. They will never tell them you're not defending anybody. You're going to be in somebody else's country for one reason or another that's not beneficial to the people at taxpayer expense. And when you get out, we're not going to look out for you, and you may have, physical and mental ailments to deal with the rest of your life if you come home. So that's what it is. And if somebody still wants to go after that, I mean, that's their thing. And I'm not against the concept of military, but the way we're using our military, it's disgusting, and it's very disrespectful to the troops. That's why I say the only way to support the troops is to end the wars. Everything else is just kind of rhetoric if you're not stopping the wars. So yeah.
That's a great line and a great concept. The only way to support the troops is to end the wars. I love that.
Yeah.
There's this comedian named, I forget his name, uh, but he's somebody that, like Jimmy Dore and Lee Camp idolize. And he said, this was during, I think, the first Iraq War, the Gulf War, and he said, I found myself in the awkward position of being for the war and against the troops. Anyway, he can deliver that better than I can. But everybody says, "Oh, I'm against the war, but I'm for the troops." So I found myself in the awkward position of being for the war but against the troops. Anyway, so
Yeah, we've kind of created this thing where, Pledge of Allegiance, national anthems before sporting events for no apparent reason.
all
Well,
right.
we know the reason, but, flyovers, uh, you know, um,
And we pay for
that kind
that.
of thing.
Taxpayers pay for that.
Yeah, we pay for all of that. And,
Yeah.
because we have all this money, we don't have anybody homeless, nobody starving,
Oh
everything
yeah.
is great. So we
Right.
just have all this extra money for
Right.
flyovers
Hmm.
and these military, uh, propaganda shows, basically. But yeah, people, they will get really, that's a line I've been using for probably 20 years. The only way to support the troops is to end the wars, and people get so angry with me. It's unpatriotic, uh, but at the same time, they're all about, um, standing for an anthem. They're about anthems. They're about flags, these symbols. Um, these are just symbols. You want to support the actual people, which are in this case the troops. And if you're sending troops off to put their lives at risk, or their health, if they come back at risk, for stuff that's not benefiting the community. It's just there to make money for a very small group of individuals, individuals who will never, ever fight in these wars, individuals whose kids will never, ever, ever serve, ever. We know this. They're sending the poor people to fight battles to make money for them. That is what we are doing.
Yeah.
And if there's countries that aren't on board, we're going to invade, and people's kids are going to go to that. People's husbands, brothers, are going to be serving in this, and you may never see them again. Or if you do see them, they might come back a completely different person, a shell of what they used to be. This is not what our troops are for. Our troops should be here protecting our borders when necessary, and when not necessary, they should be out there doing stuff like planting trees and other projects like this, stuff that makes a difference.
Sounds
So
great, Rolf. We have
yeah,
to end it there. That's a great place to end it. If you want to support the troops, then end the wars. And thank you for joining me in this conversation about the protests in Louisville. And let's make Louisville a community that works for everybody, not just a few. Have a great day.